Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Writing Life, episode 5, with me, Stuart. We're also joined today by Melissa, who's been with me for every episode so far. A pleasure to have you with me as always, Melissa.
Yep, I'm here again. You can't get rid of me, even if you wanted to. Hello, everyone.
And I'm also joined today by Emily Randall, who most of you will know through the writing community, but also as our events coordinator at Write Mentor as well. It's lovely to have you with us, Emily.
Thanks very much. It's my first time. Very excited.
Yay! Yeah, so we're here today to discuss controversial writing opinions. That's the topic of the podcast this time around. And as you know, what I always do is I send out a tweet in advance and ask people to give me their thoughts and things. So that's what we're going to be discussing a little bit later on in the show. But first of all, as we always do, let's do a quick catch up with everyone and see what everyone's been up to lately. So, Emily, as the newcomer today, do you want to fill us in on the latest with your writing? What you've been up to? What you're working on? Any particular problems?
So yeah, I'm still editing my book that's due to come out with Chicken House next year. Haven't got a date just yet. Yeah, editing's really interesting, isn't it? Because I've edited obviously by myself for a million times. I've been working on this for 4 years now, but I didn't go through this process with an agent. I went straight to doing it with an editor. So this is the first time I've done it with someone else's notes or with someone else's thoughts in mind. And it's taken me a bit of getting used to, because normally you can just kind of go fluff a flower and go off in your own direction and do what you like, but you've kind of got that guiding hand. And while it's amazing, I'm also really aware that I could screw it up. And she'd just be like, what is this? This is not what I had in mind. Contract terminated. Go away. Like, never darken the door again. I'm coming to the end, hopefully, of the structural edits at the moment. I mean, she's amazing, my editor, Rachel. She's fantastic. And I think she's made some really good thoughts. I just hope I've done them justice. And then hopefully we'll be then on to line edits if this kind of is okay. That's the plan anyway.
Yeah. And I guess all your writing time is focused very much on that at the moment.
Yeah, hugely. Like, I'm starting to think about book 2 in the sort of the back of my brain. I know what I'm going to be writing about. But the idea of actually writing another one, and I know this probably sounds kind of really weird to nearly everybody writer who is, I'm just constantly in awe of writers that are just like, look, we've written like 10 books, here they are. We've got all these stories. I think I can't imagine doing it all over again. And I know I will do, obviously, hopefully. But yeah, so book 2 in the back of my brain,
Yeah.
but that's very much kind of second priority at the moment. Yeah, just getting these edits done, dusted is the plan.
Cool. Oh, that sounds exciting. It's funny. It's funny what you say there about thinking ahead to a second book, because that is something that I think a lot of writers get stuck on a little bit. They're on that first book and they can't imagine how they're possibly going to replicate that. And I know from having written a lot of very unsuccessful books over the last sort of 10 or 15 years that it does actually become easier with each subsequent book. You're able to let go and to move on and get some closure.
Yeah.
A lot easier
Really?
with every subsequent book. I don't know. Have you found that as well, Melissa?
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, well, you'd hope. Thing is, I think there's so much pressure on debut, isn't there? And everyone's like, oh, this amazing debut author. You've never seen her before. We've discovered her. We paid this. We did that. And you see it in all the papers, especially when you're an early to writing or you're not a writer and maybe you're a reader and that's what you read about in the press. But you would hope that with every book, it's going to be better. And I think that's the thing that keeps me going is knowing, well, the next book, it has to be better because I have practiced and I have learned things and probably stuff that every single person looks back at a book and thinks, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd done this, like a few years down the line and changed it. I went to see Marcus Zuzak a few years ago, who wrote Book Thief. And he was saying exactly the same thing. He said, oh, I just look at the Book Thief and I see all the things I wish I'd done. Like, I wish I'd done this in this scene. And I wish I'd made this person like this. And of course, to some people, it's their favorite book. It's the perfect book. But to him, it's never going to be perfect. And that wasn't even his first book. He actually had quite a few before that. That was his obviously first breakthrough book. So I won't worry too much. It definitely gets easier. Or maybe the word isn't easier, but it definitely gets more enjoyable. You understand the process. You certainly know what goals you're working towards, and it feels familiar as opposed to terrifying and completely unfamiliar, which is exactly how it feels.
Yeah, totally.
When you finish one book and then you've sat on it for a few years and you've maybe touched it up or edited it and not really sure. So it can feel really terrifying. So it doesn't feel as terrifying as maybe the correct word usage.
That's very reassuring. That's great.
Yeah.
I know this. Thank you.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because Melissa and I chatted about this the other day as well, and sometimes people think, oh, this first book, the very first book that goes out and gets published, it has to be perfect, it has to be my best work ever, you know, I want it to make a big splash and blah, blah, blah. But we were saying that can actually be a bit of a poison chalice, because if things go so well with your first book, and obviously you're like in your situation where you've only written one book, then that amplifies the pressure on book 2 by so much, and actually there's a danger that you'll never ever live up to what you produced with book 1 and the success that you possibly get with it and so on, and that in some ways can actually be a negative as well.
Totally. It's this huge, I mean, there is this fear, I think. It's like, what if there is just one story? Like, what if that's the, like, do you know the book I Capture the Castle, and her dad he buys the castle that they're living in based on of his huge wealth from the book that he's written, and then he basically just doesn't write again, and he sits in his castle just kind of having annoyed his whole family. And I'm like, oh my god, what if that's me? What if I'm the dad from I Capture the Castle that just don't write again?
Although it could be worse. He has a castle.
I mean, that's true. Yeah,
I don't feel sorry for him.
It's a pretty rubbish castle, but it is a castle. Yeah, it'll do.
I do remember reading somewhere, actually, I think, J.D. Salinger, he wrote Catcher in the Rye. I don't know if you've heard of that book or if you've read it, but obviously it's like a literary classic, isn't it? It's a coming of age story from quite a while ago. There's a rumour, and I don't know how true this is because he's not around anymore, but that he continued to write novels, but he never ever showed them to anyone.
Wow.
Because he was just worried that like whatever he put out there just wasn't going to have the same sort of critical acclaim and success as Catcher in the Rye. So he kept writing stories because he enjoyed doing it, but just didn't put them out there to get published. So apparently he had all these manuscripts just in his drawer. So and he had explicit instructions for them not to be published, I'm sure. So that's why we've not seen anything else from him since as well. In terms of his estate publishing things and so on.
Yeah,
wow.
I think that's
which is
quite
quite
sad,
interesting.
actually. In a way, I think the other thing is you just got to not worry, haven't you? So he basically never put those books out because he was so worried about it. I've realized now you're going to make mistakes in your first book. You're going to write things that maybe I remember reading an interview with Samantha Shannon, who wrote The Priory of the Orange Tree Later, which is a sort of sapphic retelling of various different fairy tales. And then obviously earlier she'd done the Bone Season, and she was saying things in the Bone Season, especially from a feminist perspective, that when she was a younger author she had put in, but now would never dream of putting into a female character. It's a capture of time from how good you were at your craft when you wrote that book, how you were feeling, how old you were, what your opinions were. And so you can't push yourself too much because you're going to write something else and it'll be more nuanced and developed because you're a different person, because it's further down the timeline. So I think that's really sad that he was so worried, because I bet those books are pretty good, because I've read Catcher in the Rye and it's pretty good.
He knew what he was doing, didn't he?
Yeah. Pretty sure he knew what he was doing.
They do always they always cite that one as like one of the perfect encapsulations of the teenage voice, don't they?
Yeah, like original YA.
Yeah.
It's
but anyway, no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, it's funny though, because it is really sad that we haven't seen those, but it says a lot about writing for love as well, doesn't it? Which is something that we're always told to do first, as frustrating as that is.
That's true.
That those stories are in him, but he just wanted to write it for himself, and that, I don't know, there's something inspiring about that, even if it meant that we didn't get to see a lot of his future work.
Yeah, that's very true. You don't have to write for publication, of course. But very interesting. Be interesting. Yeah. I'm excited to. I know, obviously, I have to unfortunately fill in what I've been doing this week first, but I'm excited to get into the topic for today's podcast. Actually, after talking about all that, because it should be quite interesting.
Yeah. I know, yeah, it's interesting. But we won't labour the point, Emily, but I am 100% certain, knowing you and your writing, that you'll nail this book, but you'll also continue to produce superb works in the future as well.
Thanks, and right back at you all as well.
So, Melissa, what have you been working on recently? What have you been creating in your neurons in your mind?
Yeah, wow. I have been doing a little bit of editing on a project that hasn't been announced yet, but to be honest, finished that sort of beginning of this month, end of last month. I'm trying to remember exactly when I handed that in. So now I was working on a completely different, another book. This is exactly what I suppose Emily's talking about, with stuff floating around in your mind. And I was plotting it, but I was running into a lot of problems while plotting it. And I usually am quite quick to plot it. Like, I can see all the different, like, this obstacle has to be there because this character has to be against this world, and I can see it. But I was really struggling with this one. I still really want to do it, and it's a really fun idea, but I was struggling. And then out of the blue, I got an idea last week for a different book, and I've already completely plotted it.
Wow.
Partly using the Hub plotting service that Stuart did on Monday evening. So that was really useful. But yeah, I've immediately got the character, and so even though it's not perfect, and there's still a little few things to tweak. I've actually already also written half the opening chapter, so I know, like, it's a good thing. And I'm quite a quick drafter, so I'm thinking, if I can get this drafted out and out of my head, it's one of those ones that's like jumping onto the page for me. I think I should focus on that first. But then again, that could be dangerous, because it could also be shiny new thing syndrome. Nothing looks shinier than when you're in the middle of, like, the deepest, darkest trudging through. Oh, I need to plot this thing and I can't do it. So we'll see. But I'm sort of keeping both options open. I sound like a Love Island. I'm keeping both options open just in case. I'm not committing to anyone or any one manuscript. But yeah, that's what I've been doing, basically. Just sort of cheating on my original manuscript this week. That's what I've been doing. Good times.
Awesome.
Oh, I think someone's got an airplane going
Oh yeah,
past.
sorry, we live near
Oh my God.
Heathrow. Sorry.
The glamour of the writing
I
life.
Yeah.
I know. Hopefully this is just the one. Let's wait and see. Yeah, it's gone. We're all good.
That's exciting. I like it.
Sorry.
I know. I was wondering what that brewing noise was in the background. I wasn't sure if it was like dramatic music for Melissa's new idea or something.
Yeah, just me. Just that's how strong the idea is. It has its own theme tune now.
Oh, that's funny.
So how do you when you plot and you say the problems, like you got, what sort of problems is it that you find, if you don't mind me asking? Like, is it just that you can't see where the next bit goes?
So it's fitting together the idea for a plot. And I know I want to, so let's say, so for this one I was working on, I had a really fun idea to mix together social media and zombies. And I was like, this is really fun. But then I had to find the correct character to be in that world. And as we were talking about, Stuart was talking about this in his workshop, like, you always have to have a character that is against the world you're in, and they're going to struggle the most. They're a fish out of water in the world that they're in. And I was struggling a little bit to get that character to come together. And because I write in first person, and it's YA, so it's usually first person, I was just really struggling to find the right voice for that fun idea. So it just ended up like, it was like wading through mud. So then I was trying to create the character via putting the plot together in my fun idea. And so those three things were just fighting each other the whole time. So I'd maybe be able to plot the first 3 or 4 chapters, but then I'd be struggling with the middle. Or I'd be thinking, where does this end up? Like, what's the end goal? Like, what's the MacGuffin that they're working towards? And I just couldn't quite get all the elements to work together and play nicely together. And I have a feeling it might come together later. That's what happened with The Undying Tower. There were lots of elements with the original idea is just, oh, what if people could live forever? And then, of course, I'm struggling with, oh, is it everyone? And then later I thought, no, it's just 5% of people. Okay, that helps. And that helps with the plot. And then I thought, but who do I put in this one? So, sometimes it takes a while to come together, and it might hit me later, and then I'll just cheat on my shiny new thing and go back to my original manuscript probably. But yeah, sometimes it helps, I think, to think of something else. I quite like working on 2 things at once. I don't usually plot 2 things at once. I usually have like something I'm writing and something I'm editing. So I can go from if when you've got first draft syndrome and you're like, oh, this is rubbish, this is the worst writing ever, then you can jump into the thing that you're polishing. You're like, oh, I can write.
I'm quite good,
Look
actually.
at these things I've done after 4 drafts. Yeah, this is actually okay. And then when you get bored of editing, because it can be quite boring, especially in the final stages, you can jump back to drafting again, which can be quite fun. So I've never done this before, but yeah, I'm just kind of drafting both. I find I just don't want to get to that sort of 15, 20,000 word mark and find I've hit a brick wall, because that happens to me a lot. And I realized this was a short story, or this wasn't really a full novel. So that's what I'm stuck with. It's making all the elements work together. I've got a fun idea for a character and a fun idea for the plot and a fun idea for the world, but do they all work together? Not quite. So I'm actually borrowing some things from the old one for the new one as well, because I think they fit better. So that was like very cryptic, but if that made any sense to anyone.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do think it's important that you get those elements right before you start.
Yeah.
That was something we talked about the other day, and
Yeah.
because I've definitely gotten 30 or 40,000 words into a novel and had to scrap it because I didn't put enough thought into the
Right.
the initial planning stage, or yeah. I mean, there's lots of ways in which it can go wrong, obviously, but the more you plan it at the initial part, the less dangers you're likely to encounter
Yeah,
as you're writing
exactly.
it. Yeah. No, that's good though. It's lovely to hear that you've got something exciting on the horizon.
Yeah, no, it is fun. Like, this is the bit that, so like, it's really similar to actually what Emily was saying. It's scary when it's in your head, but once you start putting stuff down and you think, oh, this is fun, and neurons firing off and you're like, yeah, I could do this, it is really fun. Even if you're
Yeah.
not thinking from a publishing perspective, which is stressful when you're under contract and you're thinking, will I get another contract and blah blah blah. But it's so nice because that's the bit that every writer gets, whether you've just picked up pen and paper and never written a story before, or whether you're like on your 50th book and you have a DCI so-and-so series that's a bestseller on Amazon. Every writer gets that really exciting, like, oh, this will be so fun and I'm really enjoying it. And you're living inside your own like daydream whilst people are talking to you. And so that's really fun. So I'm really enjoying that bit.
That's lovely.
Yeah. And it's that, yeah, I think it's that buzz we live for, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the best bit. It is.
Okay, nice one. Oh, that was good. Glad to hear you're both nice and busy. We should get on though, because I can see time is ticking along to the controversial writing opinions.
I can't wait.
So
exciting. Chaos.
Yeah, me too. I know so much chaos, so much conflict. It's fabulous. Yeah, so I asked on Twitter the other week about controversial writing opinions that people had, and asked people what they were. And we got a lot of responses, which were quite interesting. So what we'll do is we'll quickly have a look through some of them. I'll get Emily and Melissa to give me their thoughts on that as well.
Awesome.
And then we'll finish by giving, if we haven't covered it, giving some of our controversial writing opinions at the end, I think. So yeah, first reply was Louise Finch, who had her cover reveal yesterday. Well done, Louise. Congratulations. Yeah. If you listen to us, obviously, otherwise we're just congratulating you. You'll never know, but
we love you, Louise.
So yeah, no, we do. So yeah, and first up was Louise, and she said, "I don't believe in writer's block, sort of. Even though I personally have been really SHIT at getting words on the page for a good 2 years." So interesting. She doesn't believe in writer's block. What do you think about that, Emily?
So this is really interesting because I think pre-contract, I suppose, I would have said that there was such a thing as writer's block, because you just sit there and you stare at the page and you're like, there's like, you try and write and your words, you're just like, how can I be a writer one day and write these beautiful things, and then other day it's literally like you've forgotten how to form sentences, and you will sit there and you will stare at the paper is mocking you. It's horrendous. And especially if you've like blocked out time to write and you've gone, it's just not gonna happen, you'll stand at you for hours on end. So before contract, I would have totally said there was such things writer's block. But also because I kind of suck at motivating myself. Like, that's a very personal thing. Like, I'm not great with if I know that I've got something to do. If I haven't got kind of an extreme motivation there and then, I just won't do it. So, being under contract and being on the deadlines has been a fantastic motivator. And even when I haven't been able to write and the words make no sense and, everything's rubbish, if you've got that motivation, you just write yourself into it. And I think you just keep writing. And I don't necessarily write the next thing that I've got to do, because if that's the thing that's causing you the block, sometimes I'll free write around that character. Sometimes I'll jump ahead like 3 or 4 scenes and write that. And then it is really hard, but you get there and something like it unlocks a gate or something. So I think there are definitely days where it's harder than others, but there are ways into it now that I probably wouldn't have been aware of before, because of my own rubbish motivation writing. I think that would be my thought. Yeah, so I agree. There's no such thing as writer's block. I think you've just got to find a way that inspires you. Be it music. I've got like loads of playlists that I listen to if I'm struggling. Reading another book, like if you've got like a book that jumpstarts you. For me, it's Stormkeeper's Island. Like because I love the voice so much, like I'll just jump in, read a couple of sentences of that, and then I'm like back into it. Or yeah, you free write a little bit, but yeah, I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah. It's interesting you said there about motivation as well, because that's something I did a bit of research into for the first Rejection Diaries podcast that I did. And one I can't remember who it was now, but someone quite famous said that motivation's not something that causes you to work. Motivation comes after you've done the work or after you begin the work. So what essentially he was saying was you never feel motivated before you do something. But as you do it and when you finish, that's when you feel motivated. And so motivation comes from repeatedly doing the thing that you want to do.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Totally. I think that's so right. And actually, lovely Aoife Doyle, who won our Right Mentor Award, she was telling me about this trick she has to get things started, where she does like a countdown, which is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, and she just does it. And she says that kickstarts her brain into making something happen. And that, it's kind of like that, isn't it? Like you don't necessarily want to do it straight away, but if you just crack on, it something clicks. And I think that's a really good point.
It's like Yoda always says, do or do not, there is no try.
Yes, Yoda.
Yoda's very harsh though.
Yes.
Let's be real. I agree though. I used to think there was right, but I don't think there is. Michael Grant always says that before he started writing, so he's actually married to Catherine Applegate, who's written loads and loads of really popular books. And so she was a writer before he was, in a way. Although we're all writers sort of for a long time, but you know what I mean. And they wrote, he wrote the Animorph books and they wrote some of them together. And he always says that he was not an author until he started taking it seriously. And that isn't like, oh, I'm going to write, say, for a bit every day maybe, or I'm going to get published and that makes me an author. He said he just started treating it like a job. So when he was, he would go to his, I think he used to wait on tables somewhere as well, but he had a couple of sort of kind of crappy dead-end jobs that he wasn't enjoying. So he said, right, well, my second job is now author. I'm going to work for X many hours a day as if I'm being paid to do it. And so he just started doing it, and he says that's how you do it, because people were asking him, how do you come up with so many books? He has books coming out, well, a lot of the time every year, and for a while he was on a real streak. And he said, because I sit down and it's work. It's just work. It's not even for him a number of words or a number of, it's like I have to sit down and do my work because that's what you get paid for, just like any other job. So he doesn't believe in writer's block. I think it's probably a bit harsh to say I don't believe in it at all, because obviously I understand that some things come up in life that make it really, really difficult to be creative. But in terms of specifically bum in seat doing the thing, and this is where I think we're gonna get into it, especially me and Emily, because I've seen comments about pantsing versus plotting in this thread, so I'll pass it. But especially when it comes to, if you have some plot down and you know roughly where the story's going, you can work on some part of it. I think Emily was talking about jumping around as well. That's always a good thing to do. So yeah, I think it's not necessarily for the story you're working on you might have a block, but you can always write as long as you are bum in chair, clear mind, at desk, blank Word document. Surely. Yeah.
It's so interesting you say that, because a couple of comments down there from Louise's was one from Maz Evans, who says there's no such thing as writer's block, there's just writers I really don't want to write.
Yeah, I get that.
Which is
every day.
Yeah, but it is true. Like I guess, like, you know, writer's block is just you not wanting to write.
Yeah,
rather than not being able to, because you can bash anything on the keys.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Absolutely.
You know, it doesn't have to be your story. You can write anything, just to get you going.
No, I agree.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, so quite controversial, but maybe not as much as some people think it might be. I think probably a lot of people agree that writer's block is definitely something that is in the mind of the individual rather than something that exists as a wide phenomenon.
Yeah, totally.
Here's one from, and this got the most likes in the thread. Much to my chagrin, it was from Sally Doherty, who obviously is a good friend of ours. And I think she said this deliberately to wind me up, because she said, "One that I know will rile you. Reading too many craft books stresses me out. In all honesty, if I read too much about writing rules, structure, etc., I become too fearful to write." Now, obviously, that's quite a popular opinion, because, as I say, it had the most likes on the Twitter thread. Before I respond to it, because I think we know how I'll respond, what do you think about that, Melissa?
I own lots of craft books. In fact, I spoke to Jamie on the Right and Wrong podcast about this, about craft books. I own loads of craft books, and I have dipped into them in the same way that you might have sort of a bathroom reader you dip into when you're spending some time in the bathroom. And I don't read them like cover to cover, and I don't think I've ever finished one of them actually. But I do like to have them in front of me. So, and it kind of is a motivator. Like, it's like all these important names are looking at me like, come on, we've told you what to do. There's nothing stopping you. So I like that. However, I actually think that the fear from lots of people and craft books, it kind of falls under opinions. So I think it's the same sort of thing you can get if you give it so people always say to me like, oh, how do I know who to listen to when I, finish a chapter and I give it to my critique group, say. And there might be, say, I've got a critique group that's mostly adult writers. And so I know there are some people in that critique group, as much as I dearly love them, that are not going to quite get what I'm trying to do. And so I take their comments with a pinch of salt. And I think you have to do the same with craft books, because at the end of the day, it's really, in a way, it's somebody trying to help you. They're trying to pass on their wisdom, and they're usually written by people who are best-selling novelists or editors that have picked up huge best-selling novels. There's not usually just some random person plonking out that would be weird, a craft book. You probably shouldn't read those ones. So I don't know. I think it is a controversial opinion, but I think it comes with confidence and time. I think sometimes it can be really good if I'm feeling very confident about something, maybe even overly confident. It's good to go back to those craft books and realize maybe I could do this better or that better. So I think it's a confidence thing. I think if you're not feeling very high in confidence yet on that graph of over time, how much time you've put into something versus confidence, and when you start at the beginning, you're very confident, and then if you're very confident and you're at the beginning, read some craft books. If you're in a low dip, maybe don't read some craft books, because it will make you feel frightened of writing. So I kind of agree.
Yeah, what do you think, Emily?
Yeah, so I have to be honest. I've only read one, and I say I've only read one. I read half of it and then got distracted and didn't finish it. It was Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And because like everyone, when I was struggling, I think this was when I was struggling going from like one draft to the next. I thought, right, well, I should see if what I've done does actually make any sense or any kind of structural, journey whatsoever, whether it's just me babbling on a page. And I tried really hard to make it fit, like all the percentages, and I did, and I'm so rubbish with numbers, and I got the calculator out, and I was trying to figure out what goes where, and it all just, I could hear like this noise in my brain going, and it just took all the fun out of it. I found anyway, it took all of the kind of the joy and the creativity, and hey, but what if they could do this, and then maybe it goes over here, and then maybe this happens. It became so kind. I don't know. That specific one, I just couldn't get on board with. But I know it has worked for a lot of people. And also, but I think I want to get into reading craft books. I think the more I get to kind of talk to people and kind of get into the sort of the writing industry, I'm aware that I think, not that I was lucky with the first one, but that I couldn't now go out, say I had a formula for writing it. I couldn't be like, right, boom, bash, let's go out and write the next one. And if there's anything that I can read that kind of would help that become a little bit easier, I would not be averse to doing that. I think it's just it's a question of anything. It's find the right one for you, isn't it? Like
definitely.
Not everyone's brains work the right way with everything. So I don't think Save the Cat Writes Novel was for me, but I think I'm going to keep trying to search for the one that was. So Yeah, so maybe it's not all craft books in general. Maybe it's just about finding the one that works for your particular way of working, even if that's just kind of inspirational stuff, would be my
Yeah.
thought, I think.
Yeah. The thing that I find interesting about this is, um, again, it's about the stage at which you do this. So, for example, I do actually agree that if I read too much of the craft information while I'm drafting,
Hmm.
then it starts, getting into my brain, and I'm not as productive, and I don't write as quickly because I'm sort of thinking about not just the story, but also other things that I'm reading about in the book. Whereas when I get to the point where I've finished the draft and I'm looking at the story as a whole, that's when I find it's most beneficial to read a craft book, because you can then start applying things, but it's not interfering with that creative side, if that makes
Yeah,
sense,
totally.
because you're in your analytic editor sort of mode. So and that's quite a good time, I think, to take on board what is in a craft book. So I do actually agree with the opinion to an extent. But the other thing I would say about it, and I guess this plays into a lot of my beliefs about life in general. I'm quite a scientific, analytical person, and I like processes that can be repeated. As all scientists do. The foundation of all good science is that it can be replicated independently by someone else and get the same result. And so that for me is what craft books do. They give people a framework that they can use, so that once they've written one book, they can use the same process again to write another book, and then write another
Mhm.
book, and write another book. And for me, I look at reading craft books as a way of sort of foolproofing a potential career in writing, because it's not just about writing. Being a writer is not just about writing one amazing book. It's about writing a great book every year for the rest of your life, if you want to
Yeah.
stay in contract. And this is the thing, and a lot of people look at writing as this sort of magical creative process, and it is in some ways. But also, if you just allow it to become like that, and allow your mind to always think like that, it's not, the magic just doesn't always work.
Mm.
And then what do you do? Where do you fall back upon? How do you get back on track when the magic doesn't just subconsciously take you in the right direction? And I suppose that's where I always come from when I hear that opinion. And yeah, if you're listening and you're not sure about craft books, I would always say the first time you try one, do it when you're at the editing stage rather than the drafting stage, because as the girls correctly saying, as Sally says, it can get in your head a little bit
Yeah.
during the first draft. Okay, so yes, thanks for that, Sally. I managed to give quite a balanced response
Yeah,
to
you
that, I
did.
think.
Well done.
It was, yeah. No, I think, and it's so funny how we keep coming back round to, especially with controversial opinions. I think this is always going to hit some industry stuff. So just then we got back into it again, like we were at the beginning of the call. Like, yes, but you need to think about, if you want to go into the industry, then you need a framework so you can keep
Mm.
producing these books. So I have a feeling a few of these might end up going into the sort of publishing side of writing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Because I think
Yeah,
technically there's no controversial opinions when it comes to writing, because you do whatever you want when you're writing. That is the magical bit.
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's a bit like what you were saying about writer's block, isn't it? Maybe writer's block, whatever it is much easier to get over if you've got that framework to fall back on, like rather than just kind of waiting
Yeah.
for the magic to happen and sitting there and nothing's
Yeah.
happening. If you've got some kind of almost formula to push yourself back into it, maybe that does make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think so.
yeah,
But that's just me.
yeah. No, me too. But each to their own. There is no strict rules in this game, is there? People find their own paths and their own way of doing
Mhm.
things. Which brings me along to Helen Harvey's one of her multiple opinions. She was
Uh-oh.
obviously on it this day when I posted it. But she basically said that there are no writing rules; they're more like guidelines. Which is, I guess nobody would really disagree with that.
No.
Mm.
And I think it's one of those things with writing, isn't it? I find this when I'm mentoring. Sometimes you'll say something to a mentee, and I will caveat this massively with my mentees are actually always brilliant and take on board things I say. But I also tell them, don't take things on board unquestioningly. Like, ask me if you think this is dumb, Melissa. Why are you telling me to do this? Ask me. So, for instance, I've had a couple over the years that have opened with somebody waking up in the morning, like YA, and it's like the opening scene is them getting out of bed. And I've said, this is a bit of a cliche now. It's known as, you shouldn't really just have it. You should start in the middle of a scene. And they've replied, well, Hunger Games did it, and they sold like a bajillion copies. So why can she do it and I can't? And I always think, well, because there are rules you have to learn, but then when you get the rules, they become guidelines.
Yeah.
You don't have to follow the rules once you know the rules. It's a really difficult thing to say because I have to basically immediately say, well, yes, no, I am not like the be all and end all. And yes, you can, of course, start with somebody getting up, but only if you're Suzanne Collins. And then you can do whatever you want. So I kind of agree. I think there are guidelines, but I think the rules are really important to start with. Stuart knows how I feel about the rules. I'm like a very rule-oriented person. I love breaking rules, but you have to know the rules and respect them before you can break them. So no, I agree.
Yeah, you don't want to be making
That's
any like
very well
really
put.
not awful mistakes, but mistakes that are easily rectified. I think you're right. I think all rules generally in writing are someone's opinions, aren't they? Like you say, so it's a question of what you kind of adhere to and what you don't. But yeah, really, if you're going to kind of go against them just willy nilly, that's not going to help anyone. Like you say.
Yeah. And also there's there's the whole thing if you want to be published, and this is where it differentiates between just writing and wanting a career, but there are obviously like genre conventions and so on that you have to stick to when you're writing things. As much as people say I want to, my book shouldn't possibly be placed in a genre because it's so different from everything else out there and so on, but when people write those kind of books, where does a bookseller put it? Where does a publisher place it alongside in their autumn list? Like people want to be able to label things, and so sometimes sticking closer, with a little twist, but sticking closer to the guidelines is hugely beneficial to you.
Yeah, yeah, especially at the beginning. I think when you're starting out and you are trying to make your way through it, there's no point in. I'm sorry, there's another airplane coming along. There's no point in trying to be controversial just for the sake of it. And I think if you generally want to get somewhere, if you're writing just for yourself, then like you say, do whatever you like. But if you generally want to get somewhere in the industry, you're not benefiting yourself if you're going to ignore the kind of rules that are set out for them.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to a different one. Let's go for something slightly different in tone. So this is from Yvonne Banham, who I know she was the former Scottish Scooby leader, and has just recently passed on that voluntary role. But she's lovely and a stunning writer as well. But she says you don't have to write every day. There, I said it. So, what are our thoughts on writing every day, Emily?
So, I'm with Yvonne, I think, actually. I think there's a lot to be said for like just sitting down and cracking something out as well, like, sort of 100 words here, whatever, just to kind of keep that ticking over. But life is life as well. And I think if you're going to start punishing yourself, we've all got huge other things going on in our lives. There's jobs, families, all of that kind of stuff. As we all know, that even if you're a writer under contract, you're not generally earning enough to just do that. Like, we'll have other jobs and everything like that. So there will be times where life gets in the way. And I think having this constant sort of pressure of you have to write every day, it can make you feel like a failure. And I think sometimes it's more beneficial to give yourself a little bit of space if ultimately you're going to be a better writer because of it. But I can also see the advantage of if you have a spare 5 minutes and you just want to kind of do something. Like I've always found like Twitter flash fiction competitions really helpful, or the Right Mentor one, when we do the magazines, that kind of thing. If you're in a bit of a lull, just to kind of get your brain working again, to start working to a prompt, I find really helpful. So yeah, that's a bit kind of on the fence, but I think probably you shouldn't force yourself to do it if it feels like it's going against the rest of your life. Elle McNichol said something really great in the panel that we did. She said, "Look, art is art and life is life. Basically, you've got to put, you've got to separate those two things sometimes."
Yeah. So we've been on the fence long enough, Emily. I hate the thing of writing every day. I hate it. It really annoys me. I am somebody that and this horrifies people, and it makes it very difficult in my critique group. I'm not going to lie, actually. This does make it tough. I write for about a month drafting a book, and I do like nothing. My entire life falls apart. This is probably really bad, actually, really bad advice. But I piles of washing everywhere, and I know I can do that because I don't have like children or anything to deal with that I can just throw toast to in the corner. I don't need to do that. I can just live off my own toast, not do any of my own washing, and then I just do that for 4 weeks, and then I have several months off writing.
That's nice.
I don't do any writing at all, and it's great. I do editing, obviously, and especially because I've got an agent, and hopefully if someone picks up something at a publisher, then they're giving me notes in between. But of course, there's big waits between those, and they take, month and a half to read them and then give you back the notes. And I do the same with editing. I edit in really short bursts. I sit on the edit notes for a couple of weeks, and then I just do them in like 16-hour days. I do 2 or 3 days, and I get it done. And I live inside it, and I don't watch TV, and I don't read, and I don't look at anything else, and I get it done. And then I have another huge break. So some people would call me lazy, and that's okay. I'm actually okay with that. But I do not agree with writing every day. I don't do it. It wouldn't work for me. I tried it once, and I just find I like to write with I like to try and find a really strong voice. And I find I can't do it if I write every day because the voice starts to peter out, especially if you're doing other stuff like watching TV, reading, watching movies, talking to other people. The voice starts to peter out. So I have to do it as quickly as possible. That's just how I work. And then I do spend, because I plot it so tightly, first of all. So I suppose you could count that as writing. I will plot it for maybe a month first. Then I don't have to worry too much. Like in editing, it's not too rough usually. There's obviously some things that may not make sense because I wrote it so quickly. But usually there's not too many structurals, so then I can focus line on line. So no, I hate the writing every day thing. I need big breaks in between, and that's okay. If you're somebody listening, you need big breaks in between. That's allowed. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But I do understand that some people are not weird like me, and so probably would like to write every day, and it's much more chill way of doing things. But I just need a big break.
Fair dues.
Yeah.
Controversial.
No, I think that's fair enough. And as Emily alluded to from Elle, it's about separating life from writing, and however you want to divide that is fine. So, for example, some people wouldn't have 16 hours in the day to sit down and edit in a burst, so they have to then do it over a much longer period and smaller time frames in each of the days. But I always think, and I like to do this, Melissa, but I always liken writing to exercise and going to the gym, etc. So, for example, like anyone who regularly works out, whatever, that you shouldn't go to the gym every day, because your body needs time to rest and to grow and to recover from the session that you've previously done.
I'll take your word for it.
And I think,
I have no idea.
because if you've really pushed yourself and stressed yourself, the muscle fibers are torn and need time to repair, and they grow back bigger and stronger. But you've got to give it time to rest in order to do that. And I think writing's a little bit like that. I think if you just force yourself to do it every day, are you pushing yourself every day? Are you allowing yourself the breathing space to grow a little bit and to get stronger and to mentally sort of develop more of that idea, that scene, that character, that story? And actually, I think little breaks are good for that, because I know other people say this all the time, but I do think of thinking about my writing and my story as part of the writing process.
Right.
And so, not actually punching the keys, but actually just turning it over in your head or whatever else is still part of it. So it's definitely a more nuanced thing than simply a professional writer should write every day, because I'm a professional teacher, but I don't teach every day.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I think also thinking about separating it from life is also a good point, because I've just realized when you were talking then, I'm really ratty when I'm writing. When I'm doing first draft, I'm horrible. I was going to swear then and say something about it. I'm horrible to live with when I'm writing. I'm really awful. I'm fine when editing. That feels a bit more chilled out. And I'm fine when plotting. But drafting, I'm awful. So the way I live my life currently, and this will probably change in future, this does keep it separated for me, because I get it all done in one big blast. And then I can actually be a human being that is pleasant to be around vaguely the rest of the time. So yeah, that's why it helps me.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, we're going to quickly move on because I'm conscious of the time, folks. This is a long one, but we'll do one more before we round things up. Let's see, what have we got? Oh yes, here's a good one, because I've got strong feelings about this. It's from Jane. and she says, I'm not sure where everyone else stands on this, but she says your characters do not go against your plans and do their own thing. Your brain decides where they go. And this is, I guess, alluding to when, you know, how people, writers, very creative writers often say, oh, the characters just do their own thing, and, you know, I just let the plot go wherever it happens to go, and I don't worry too much about it, and so on. So Emily, you're bursting to say something there, so
guess what I'm about to say.
I'll let you in on this.
Yeah, so I am one of those writers. I very much. So I mean, I'm of the kind of sort of weird sort of psychological bump, I guess, that like when you think about it, your book is all you, isn't it? It's all your head, or your characters are all like weird little splices of your brain. So ultimately, they never do anything on their own because they're not magical, you know, sort of anamorphic creatures that just, you know, it's all you. It's somewhere you create them, but certainly on the first draft, for me, there is nothing better than like you know, you're seeing it like a film, you're writing it down, you know, you're like, yeah, this is great, what's happening? And then they just do something totally unexpected. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll follow this and I'll just see what happens. And that has actually changed the entire course of this book that I'm writing now. And obviously in edits you kind of bring it back down, or you go in a different direction, or blah blah blah. But yeah, for me, once you know, it's got to be the point when you know your characters really well. And I think because I'm an actor, for me, characters are something that I feel very, very passionate, or was an actor, feel very, very passionate about, and feel more confident than some other stuff in my writing that I can create quite well-rounded characters. And as she says, this might come back to bite me in the bum in several months' time, we'll see. Yeah, so for me, they do kind of sometimes, because if I'm at a point where I've created them real enough, they will just go off and do something, and then I will just go, oh yeah, let's just follow that, let's just see what happens. But again, obviously, it's all me. They're not real people. That's my that's ultimately the realist.
Your caveat.
My caveat, yeah. They are not real people. And if it doesn't serve the plot, basically, obviously, I will rein it back in, but in editing. But I think they can just wander off on their own. What do you think?
Melissa, you can go next.
You want me to go? Okay. So this is probably because Stuart knows. Emily, you're wrong. Okay, you're wrong. They do not do whatever they want to do on their own, because
Rude.
I'm a control freak. I'm a control enthusiast, I always say on this, and I like to have I like the rules, and I like my craft. I like everything to be in control, and I have a tight plot, and everyone is on a moving conveyor belt created by me, the god of the world I'm writing, and so they do not go off and do whatever they want to do. Yeah, I to be honest, I think we talked about, somebody mentioned this once before, and this sounds really cool, this phenomenon of your characters like creating almost actions for themselves and surprising you, and it sounds awesome. I wish I could experience it, but nope, never experienced that. They are in the exact place I tell them to be all the time. They're on the X and I'm the director and I'm telling them where to go and I've written the script, and they always follow the instructions because I plot really, really carefully before I start. And then because I write so quickly, we don't have time for this, I say to them. We don't have time for you to just run off in different directions. It's not okay. So yeah, no, it's for me, that never happens. It sounds really cool. Like, I actually sounds like something that one day maybe it'll happen to me and I'll be like, this is it. This is what it feels like. But no, never happens to me. I'm a plotter to the end. I'm a control freak. Everyone has to do exactly what I say. When I was a child, I wanted to be a film director. And then I found out it wasn't just like a job that you apply for, film director. So I realized if I write a book, I'm even more in control than a director, because I can decide who's in it and I can cast whoever I want and they have no say in it. They just have to be in my book because it's in my head. So yeah, the control freak part of me, this just terrifies me and amazes me in equal measure. So no, they do not do what you want. I agree with the tweet.
Interesting.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Because I guess, like, you know, from Emily's point of view, it's nice because then maybe something happens that you didn't expect and it actually, as you say, takes off in a better direction. Or you find out something about the character that you didn't actually plot out initially. And Melissa's probably like twitching there as I say you find out because you already knew because you made the character do that. but then also obviously there's the advantage that, you know, from Melissa's point of view, where like you have less of that feeling of helplessness. I think sometimes when we feel like, oh, I'm really stuck with this story, we do forget that it's on us to drive it forward.
Yeah.
Like saying, it's a hard one though, because this is the problem with this bit of tissue inside our skull, is that it is way more complicated than any of us could possibly imagine. It's neuroscientists still don't understand the majority of what our brain does. So there might actually be a little node in our brain that is responsible for autonomous character development. I don't know.
Well, they all just live in your brain, just like this little section of your brain just hanging out. That's a nice thought, isn't it?
Yeah. You just
sit.
open it up and they
Yeah,
pop
there
out.
they are.
Yeah.
It's all a little sleep.
Okay. We have got so many more of these to go through. I think we might even have to do a part 2 of this particular topic to get through them all. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it up a little bit for today, because we're now on 50 minutes, and with the best will in the world, I don't think anyone wants to listen to us for any more than an hour. So
Rude.
Yeah, so let's quickly finish off with our own personal controversial writing opinions. So, Melissa, do you want to go first this time?
See, a lot of mine have been covered because, as I say, I am a control freak. But I'd say my number one, which I feel like I saw perhaps Emily put something about, is I pantsed my entire first 2 novels, and it took a really long time and it was really hard. And then I plotted one with Save the Cat, Emily's favourite book of all time. And and ever since then, I'm like, this is plotting. Like, that's how you write a book. So my controversial writing opinion is that pantsing has no place in publishing. No pantsing. You have to produce a pitch at least anyway when you're pitching a book. So no, that's my controversial opinion. I will stand by it. Plotting forever. Plotting is my one true love. Plotting, yes, in control.
Emily, you have right of reply here. What have you got to
Well,
say?
I've abandoned my initial bit I was going to say, because now I feel like I have to fight for the pantsers. I am a pantser through and through. I mean, like I said, this might come back to bite me in the bum in sort of, several books down the line, where I true blue plotter like you. But I think the nicest thing is you go into the book, you've got like a vague idea maybe of where it's going to go, and like a little bit of what it was about maybe, and then just write and see what happens. And then in subsequent edits, then you can kind of bring it around to a coherent story. I think that's my view. I think pantsing is great.
That's giving me hives just hearing
it. That's funny. And just to finish off on that particular topic, my belief, and again, I'm probably wrong, is that even pantsers have a plot in their head, or they have signposts which they're working towards, or they have just a very good innate sense of story and structure already from all of the stories and films and media that you've consumed throughout your life. I think it's we have evolved into be storytellers as humans. That's how we communicate and passed on vital, important survival messages in the past, and therefore I think that's kind of almost innate in people. And so even when people say they're pantsing, it's not like they are completely flying words out there and just no clue where they're going. There are signposts, and there must be some kind of innate, even if it's not conscious, sort of ability to structure their story, I think.
Yeah, to be fair, Phil Earle said, which I think he's the writer I've heard that I've closely identified with his method from when we interviewed him for WM Lit. He said that he's watched so much TV and he's seen so many bits of theatre and read so many books that he doesn't necessarily plan, but it's there. It's all kind of, you have a lifetime of watching TV programs and films and books, and you do suck up a kind of the natural like tropes and all of that kind of stuff. It's like you say, it's kind of innate, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. I think so.
That's very diplomatic. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to find a happy medium there between both very extreme views.
No, wow. I see your point. Point. Take it.
So thanks both for joining me today. It's been honestly so much fun chatting. It's been really lovely hearing people's opinions. I think we'll probably do a part 2 on this topic, because there's still loads more replies and controversial opinions to go through. Okay, so yeah, thanks very much for joining me today, folks. And for all of you listening out there, we'll see you next time.
See you next time, guys.
Bye. Thank you for having us.